Did you know that simply understanding one hidden aspect of your personality can make someone feel drawn to you many times more, without changing your appearance or trying to be different? The secret lies in feminine archetypes, forms of energy that allow women to shine in their own unique way, even when they are not trying at all. More than 100 years ago, psychologist Carl Jung introduced the concept of feminine archetypes, psychological maps that lie deep within every woman. Each archetype carries its own distinct energy. Some embody the innocence and curiosity of a young maiden. Others radiate the warmth of a mother or the fiery allure of a lover. What's fascinating is that we do not embody just one archetype, but rather a combination of many different ones. Depending on the stage of life or the situation we are in, a particular archetype may rise to the surface more strongly. Understanding your archetypes is like discovering a compass that guides how you show up in the world, how you love, and how you are loved. When you know your strengths, you know how to amplify them. When you understand your weaknesses, you can avoid situations that leave you hurt or diminish your natural magnetism. In today's video, I will explore with you the 7 feminine archetypes that Carl Jung studied specifically in relation to women. You will gain clarity on the strengths that allow you to shine, the psychological traps you may fall into if you are unaware of your limitations, and how to activate or balance these energies to become more magnetic and more fulfilled. These are not abstract theories, but practical principles you can apply immediately, from the way you communicate and care for yourself to how you nurture long-lasting love. And one important note, don't miss the final archetype, because it holds a secret that many women who succeed in love quietly apply without ever speaking about it. Understanding archetypes to live fully. If you have ever heard someone box you into a certain type of woman and then found yourself saying, "That's just who I am," then this is the point where you really need to grasp Jung's deeper framework. In Carl Jung's view, an archetype is not a label to stick on your forehead for easy identification. It is more like an inner script, a recurring psychological pattern that shapes how we tend to love, how we work, and how we react under pressure, even when we have no conscious intention to do so. You can imagine it this way. Inside each of us are several familiar roles. When things are going well, one role takes the wheel. When stress hits, another rushes in to take over. Some roles get neglected for so long that we forget we are even capable of living that way. Archetypes are the molds of those roles, while your lived experience is what gives them a unique face. Put simply, you do not belong to just one archetype. In real life, you carry many different archetypal energies. Right now, you are simply used to living in one particular mode. And because it feels familiar, you mistake it for your true self. Today, you might be very Artemis, independent, direct, and freedom-loving. But in a relationship that makes you feel unsafe, Hera suddenly comes forward, needing commitment, needing a clearly defined place. One person, 2 modes of operation. Does that sound contradictory? In reality, the psyche is always seeking balance. This is where the compensation mechanism comes in. When we lack something, we often exaggerate something else to make up for it. For example, a woman who is used to handling everything on her own may live very much as Athena, highly rational, rarely asking for help. That energy makes her capable, but it can also leave her awkward when it comes to needing comfort. So when love touches that softer place, she may either become even more rigid and try to fix the other person with solutions, or suddenly become overly sensitive and withdraw. Sometimes you don't even recognize yourself. You may think you are a quiet, inward Hestia, yet when pushed too far, you snap into a fierce Artemis. You may believe you only need freedom, but deep down, you long to be chosen and to stay. Like Hera, for Jung, this is the movement toward balance. What is missing will demand a voice, sometimes erupting, sometimes pulling you into a repeating loop. When do you notice yourself switching roles? Most often. Jung captured this dynamic in one sharp sentence. The psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside, as fate. This line fits perfectly when we talk about the 7 feminine archetypes. Because if you do not recognize which role is driving you, life starts to feel repetitive. Falling for the same type of person, arguing about the same issue, burning out in the same rhythm, and then wondering, why am I always like this? Before we go into each archetype, I want you to do one small thing right now. Whether you are listening while driving, washing dishes, or lying in bed before sleep, you can still answer. Just answer silently in your mind, or write down a single line. The first question is, what do people praise me for most often? Do they often call you strong, reliable, well-organized, stylish, warm, deep, calm? What you are praised for most often usually points to your dominant archetype, the one you express so naturally that you assume everyone can do it. The second question is, what kind of suffering keeps repeating in my life? Do you often suffer from being misunderstood as cold, from carrying everything on your shoulders until you feel resentful, from losing yourself every time you fall in love, from fearing commitment yet feeling lonely? This recurring pain usually points to where an archetype has gone out of balance. Either you are using it too much, or you have neglected another part that is needed to restore equilibrium. Now, try asking yourself one more question. If your life were a movie, which scene keeps replaying, and what role are you playing in it? When you begin to see the role, you gain choice. You can still be Artemis, Athena, or Aphrodite in your own way, but you are no longer dragged along unconsciously by them. Let these questions act like a mirror, so that as we move into the 7 feminine archetypes through Carl Jung's psychological framework, you begin to recognize, this is the way I'm used to living, and this is where I tend to stumble. From there, understanding archetypes stops being about categorizing yourself and becomes a way of rereading your own life more gently, more deeply, and with far more room to choose how you live. A mini test to help you identify your dominant feminine archetype. Before we go into each feminine archetype, I'd like you to do a very small test. This is not a right or wrong quiz. There's no scoring, and you don't need to arrive at a fixed conclusion. All you need to do is listen, notice your inner reactions, and choose what feels most accurate for you at this moment. The first thing I want you to identify is this: when everything is fine, when life isn't too pressured, when you feel comfortable being yourself, what kind of woman are you most like? This is your default state, the version of you that walks into a room without bracing yourself, the way you respond naturally without having to think too much. Some people, when they're doing well, are very independent, clear-minded, self-directed, and dislike being controlled. Some are soft, warm, attentive, and enjoy taking care of others. Some are creative, drawn to beauty, and easily moved by emotion. Others are quiet, inward, and need personal space to recharge. You don't need to choose with logic. Just ask yourself, when I'm not defending myself, who am I? Next, I want you to think about another very real, very human state. When you are stressed, under pressure, or pushed into situations that make you feel unsafe, what kind of person do you become? This is your stress mode, and it often surprises even you. Some people become more controlling, colder, and more rational under stress. Some become clingier, seek reassurance, and fear being abandoned. Some become impulsive, easily bored, and quick to break things off. Others withdraw completely, disappear, and don't want anyone to come close. If you look back at your arguments, periods of burnout, or broken relationships, you'll likely see a familiar role showing up again and again. That isn't the worst version of you. It's simply an archetype stepping in to protect you. And then there's the third part, which many people find the hardest. The kind of woman you admire, find beautiful and appealing, but feel tired or uncomfortable imagining yourself living as. This is the archetype you lack, not because you're inadequate, but because you've never given yourself enough space to live that way. You might deeply admire women who know how to enjoy life, appreciate beauty, and move slowly, yet you tell yourself it's not practical. You might be drawn to someone's quiet depth and stillness, but fear that if you lived that way, you'd be forgotten. Or you might long for decisiveness and clarity, while inwardly avoiding conflict and confrontation. The archetype you lack is often a part of you that's been sleeping, waiting to be named. Once you have these 3 images in mind, I want you to remember one very important sentence, which I'll repeat many times throughout this series. Don't try to choose what's correct. Just choose what resonates. What feels true in your body? What matches your lived experience? What makes you subtly nod when you hear it? You don't need to force yourself into a fixed category. You also don't need to worry about whether you're choosing wrong. For Jung, the psyche doesn't operate on right and wrong, but on awareness. The moment you think, "Oh, that does sound like me," you've already begun stepping out of the unconscious. Throughout the next part of the podcast, as I move through the 7 feminine archetypes one by one, I want you to listen with 3 ears. The ear of your default self, the ear of your stress self, and the ear of the part you lack. Some sections will feel very familiar, very accurate, as if you're being described. Others may make you slightly uncomfortable or feel beautiful but distant. Don't push those away. That reaction is important data, too. As you listen, you might quietly ask yourself, which part of me is nodding right now? And which part of me is pulling back? Those 2 questions can take you much further than any personality test ever could. The purpose of this mini-test is not for you to say, "I am this type of woman," and stop there. The purpose is to help you see that you don't have only one way of existing. You can keep the archetype that helps you stay grounded, adjust the part that causes you to stumble, and gently practice living a little more of the archetype you're missing. When you do that, no single role gets to pull you along anymore. Now you have 3 reference points in hand. From here on, as we move into each specific archetype, you won't be listening as if to a psychological analysis, but as if you're looking into different mirrors, reflecting pieces of yourself. Before going any further, I want to pause for just a brief moment to thank you for being here up to this point. The time you're taking to listen, reflect, and stay with these questions about yourself truly matters, and I deeply appreciate that presence. Let me know in the comments which personality assumption from this mini-test you resonated with the most. I'd love for us to share and reflect together. If anything you're hearing resonates with you in any way, feel free to gently tap like and share this video. Each share not only helps the content reach more people, but also allows these deeper psychological insights to find more companions on the journey of self-understanding. And now, we'll move into the most important part, identifying the 7 feminine archetypes. I believe that somewhere within these 7, you'll recognize what makes your uniqueness truly your own. Archetype 1, the Maiden. The first archetype I'd like to invite you to meet, and one that many women recognize themselves in at least partially, is the Maiden. Try to imagine this. On a quiet afternoon, you're wearing a simple dress, sitting at your usual cafe. You're not trying to impress anyone, yet you laugh naturally when you hear a funny story. There's something about you that makes the air around you feel lighter, softer. The person across from you feels more at ease, more willing to open up, more inclined to smile along. You're not doing anything special, but your presence feels like a breath of fresh air. That is the Maiden energy showing itself. The Maiden represents beginnings. She carries curiosity within her, eyes open to the world, and a sense that everything is still possible. This energy isn't tied to age. A woman in her 40s or 50s can still embody the Maiden clearly if she retains her sense of wonder toward life, allows herself to be moved by small things, and dares to believe that tomorrow can be different from today. In everyday life, you can recognize a Maiden through very simple behaviors. She laughs easily, is easily moved, and connects effortlessly. She listens well, empathizes naturally, and often senses the atmosphere and emotions of others. She is flexible, adaptable, and not overly rigid in her thinking. When entering a new environment, the Maiden usually doesn't carry too many defenses. She is curious, observant, and receptive, and allows things to touch her before rushing to judge. The Maiden's uniqueness lies precisely in this youthful quality. Being around a Maiden often makes others feel younger, not because she's trying to do anything, but because she awakens a sense of lightness and openness in those around her. She brings freshness, and in a world where everyone is bracing themselves to be strong and in control, that freshness becomes a rare gift. In love, the Maiden often connects very quickly through emotion. She has a way of making the other person want to protect her, want to stay close, want to care for her. Her eyes are usually full of hope. She believes in the goodness of others, believes in beginnings, and believes that if feelings are sincere enough, they will lead to a beautiful ending. That belief is precisely what makes her so magnetic. In Jungian psychology, Maiden energy is linked to potential. She symbolizes not knowing yet, but being willing to explore. And because of that, if she isn't supported in the right way, the maiden can easily fall into her own trap. The maiden's biggest trap is a lack of inner direction. Because she's used to receiving, listening, and letting others lead, she can lose touch with the question, what do I want? When things are going smoothly, this doesn't cause much trouble. But when difficulties arise, the maiden tends to feel like a victim of circumstances, rather than someone who can influence them. Some maidens live very deeply in the world of emotion and imagination. She trusts first impressions, believes promises, and hopes that if she is gentle enough, kind enough, everything will turn out fine. In love, this can lead her to overlook very clear warning signs. She waits for the other person to understand her, change on their own, or realize it themselves, instead of daring to face reality directly. When the maiden is out of balance, she easily falls into cycles of disappointment, high expectations, deep disappointment, quick trust, profound hurt, and then she wonders, why do these things keep happening to me? If you recognize yourself in that pattern, I want you to listen slowly to this question. Are you living from innocence, or are you avoiding responsibility for your own choices? These two can look very similar on the outside, but they feel very different on the inside. At work, the maiden often shines in the early stages. She learns quickly, adapts fast, and connects well with colleagues and clients. But without structure and commitment, she can become bored when things turn repetitive or difficult. When work stops feeling fun, like it did at the beginning, the maiden may start doubting herself or thinking she chose the wrong path, instead of staying long enough to grow. What's important to understand is this: maiden energy is not meant to be eliminated. It needs to mature, not be suppressed. A mature maiden keeps her softness, curiosity, and sensitivity, but gains an inner axis. She no longer waits for others to decide her life for her. She knows what she wants, and dares to take responsibility for it, even when it means facing disappointment. You can see this journey clearly through familiar figures in popular culture. Daphne, in the first season of Bridgerton, is a classic maiden, gentle, naive, and largely unaware of her own needs and power. But through marriage, motherhood, and real-life friction, she doesn't lose her softness. She simply becomes more refined, intuitive, and grounded. Or take Elle Woods, who begins as a girl seen as naive and underestimated, but is forced to grow up, and through that process, reveals tremendous inner strength. If you recognize that you carry strong maiden energy, the question isn't, how do I become less naive, but rather, how do I keep my innocence without losing my backbone? The answers are very practical. Nurture your curiosity, but pair it with small, responsible actions. Allow yourself to try new things, take an unfamiliar class, go on a short trip, enter a new environment. But after each experience, ask yourself, what did I learn from this? Don't just feel, take something with you. Learn emotional self-reliance. When a problem arises, before immediately looking for someone to lean on, try asking, what can I do right now? You don't need to do it perfectly. Just take one small step. Each time you do this, the maiden in you becomes less dependent, without having to turn rigid. And finally, practice setting boundaries with softness. You can remain gentle, empathetic, and attentive, but you don't have to accept everything. Saying, I need some time to think, or I'm not comfortable with this, doesn't make you less feminine. It simply makes you safer with yourself. If you recognize the energy of this young maiden within you, what matters is not becoming less naive, but giving that innocence and inner support. The maiden doesn't need to turn into a hardened or closed-off woman to be safe. What she needs is a small anchor, strong enough to keep her from being swept away by emotions or other people's expectations. There is a very gentle way to begin. You don't need to prepare anything, and it only takes about a minute. Right now, or whenever you find yourself waiting, hoping, or feeling slightly lost, you can pause and slowly ask yourself 3 questions. What am I curious about? What am I afraid of? And if I could do just one very small thing today, what would it be? You don't need perfect answers, only honest ones. The first question keeps the maiden in you alive. The second helps her stop avoiding. And the third becomes the small bridge between innocence and maturity. As you begin taking these tiny steps, something interesting happens. You keep your clear eyes, your gentleness, and your ability to be moved by life, but you no longer stand still, waiting for someone else to lead the way. You begin to walk on your own, even if it's only a short distance each time, and that is what allows the maiden energy within you to become more beautiful, deeper, and more enduring over time. If you're listening to this and feel your heart soften just a little, it's very possible that an important part of you is being named, and it's just as possible that this young maiden doesn't need you to change, only to stay with her long enough for the two of you to grow together. Youthfulness isn't about how old you are, but about whether you still dare to open your heart to life. Archetype 2, the mother. Maiden energy brings a sense of freshness and lightness to the world, but when that softness blends with the instinct to care for and protect, we move into another archetype, the mother, carrying warmth and a powerful sense of shelter. Not everyone who carries this energy is a mother in the biological sense. In Jungian psychology, the mother is an inner state. It's the quality you bring when you walk into a room, and others feel they can breathe more easily. When something goes wrong, people naturally think of you as someone they can lean on. When you don't need to say much, yet your presence alone is enough to make others feel safe. If the maiden is like a breeze carrying the scent of beginnings, the mother is like a hearth fire, not showy, but warming everyone who comes close. In everyday life, you can recognize the mother through very familiar behaviors. She's the one who remembers who's tired, who's sad, who hasn't eaten, the one who instinctively tidies up when a space feels chaotic, not out of perfectionism, but because she wants things to feel easier for everyone. She listens without rushing, without interrupting, without immediately offering advice. In a group of friends, the mother often sets the rhythm. When things get tense, she softens them. When things fall apart, she reconnects them. There's something especially interesting about this energy. The mother often isn't fully aware of her own power. She simply thinks, I'm doing this because I care. Yet that very care creates a rare sense of safety. In a world full of competition and defenses, safety is something everyone longs for, but few know how to create. The mother's most unique strength lies in her ability to nurture life in the broadest sense. She can nurture a relationship, a team, a project, a community, or even the potential within another person. Around a healthy mother, people tend to grow, not because they're pushed, but because they're supported. In love, the mother brings the feeling of, we have each other. She doesn't love impulsively, but through steady presence. She remembers small details. She notices subtle changes. She stays when things are no longer as exciting as they were in the beginning. Because of this, many people find it very hard to leave a mother, even when they're not mature enough to love her in the way she deserves. At work, the mother often shines in roles centered on caring for people, education, human resources, healthcare, service, community work, or any environment that requires patience and stability. She's good at keeping things running smoothly, building culture, and tending to what no one notices, but everything falls apart without. If an organization were a living body, the mother would be its immune system. But like the maiden, every archetype has its cost when lived to excess, and the mother's biggest trap is giving without knowing when to stop. Because she's used to putting others first, she easily forgets that she, too, is a human being with limits. She struggles to say no, not because she doesn't know how, but because she's afraid of hurting others or disrupting the harmony she's worked so hard to maintain. When the mother becomes unbalanced, devotion turns into exhaustion. She takes care of everyone except herself. She listens to everyone except her own inner voice. The needs she sets aside don't disappear. They simply sink below the surface. Over time, they can turn into fatigue, irritability, or a quiet resentment that's hard to name. Some mothers begin to feel, no one understands me, or no one loves me the way I love them, yet don't know how to say this without feeling guilty. Another shadow of this energy is the tendency to become the one who knows best. Having grown accustomed to caring and guiding, the mother may intervene too deeply in others' lives, even with good intentions. She believes she's helping, but the other person may feel controlled, judged, or seen as incapable. This boundary is very thin, and many mothers only realize it once a relationship starts to feel suffocating. In Jungian psychology, The mother archetype is associated with the goddess Demeter, a symbol of fertility and protection. But Jung also emphasized that any archetype, when not made conscious, can operate unconsciously and cause harm. This doesn't mean the mother is wrong. It simply means that love also needs boundaries in order not to destroy the one who gives it. If you sense that you carry strong mother energy, I want you to pause with one very important question. Do I care for others out of love, or because I fear losing my value if I'm no longer needed? These two motivations look very similar on the outside, but feel completely different on the inside. One fills you up, the other slowly drains you. In love, a healthy mother learns how to care without sacrificing herself. She still nurtures and supports, but she doesn't carry her partner's emotions or responsibilities for them. She allows the person she loves to grow, rather than keeping them forever in a protected role. This takes immense courage, because sometimes loving with less intervention is harder than loving by doing everything. At work, the mother needs to learn how to distribute her energy. Not everything has to be done by her hands. Not everyone needs to be rescued. When she allows others to take responsibility for their part, she doesn't become indifferent. She becomes sustainable. In personal life, the mother needs to learn a skill that sounds simple, but is extremely difficult for her. Receiving help, receiving care, receiving love, without guilt. Many mothers are so used to giving that when they're cared for, they don't know what to do with it. For mother energy to mature and remain sustainable, there is a very gentle practice you can try. Whenever you notice yourself feeling tired, irritated, or doing too much for others, pause for about a minute. Place a hand on your chest, take a slow breath, and ask yourself, what do I need right now? Not what others need, what I need. It might be rest, it might be silence, it might be being listened to. Simply recognizing this is already a huge step for the mother. When you begin listening to your own needs regularly, something interesting happens. You don't love less. You don't become cold. On the contrary, your love becomes steadier, cleaner, and no longer carries quiet resentment. You remain a place of support, but no longer a dumping ground for everything. If, as you listen, you feel a tightness in your throat or a familiar fatigue being named, this archetype likely plays an important role within you. And perhaps what the mother in you needs most right now isn't to try harder, but to be cared for in the same way you've cared for others for so long. Archetype 3. The lover. When a woman begins to learn how to care for herself instead of only caring for others, a very subtle shift takes place. The warmth of the mother does not disappear, but it no longer flows outward in only one direction. It starts to turn inward, touching the sensation of being alive, the feeling of inhabiting a body, a heart that is capable of being stirred. And in that moment, another fire is lit. No longer the warmth that shelters, but passion. No longer staying to protect, but staying because I desire to. That is when the energy of the lover emerges. The lover enters life quietly, yet is hard to miss. It may be in the way she walks, just a beat slower than others. It may be in the directness of her gaze, without avoidance. It may be in the way she is fully present in a conversation, making the other person feel truly seen. Those who carry this energy usually don't have to try very hard to attract attention. Their magnetism comes from being fully inside the moment, unhurried, undistracted, not pulling themselves out of the experience as it unfolds. In everyday life, the lover is deeply attuned to her body. She knows which scents she enjoys, which fabrics feel good against her skin, and which music softens her heart. She doesn't live only in her head, but through her senses. A meal is not just about being full, but about savoring. An evening is not just about ending the day, but about feeling alive. Some people enter a room carrying a strong sense of presence. Very often, they are lovers. The lover's most distinctive gift is her ability to make life feel vivid. She reminds others that living is not only about fulfilling responsibilities, but also about experiencing pleasure, joy, and emotional resonance. In a world accustomed to suppressing feeling and prioritizing efficiency, the lover is a reminder that we have the right to enjoy, the right to feel beautiful, the right to desire, and to be desired. In love, the lover creates intensity. She loves with her whole being. When she loves, she is present. She looks, listens, touches, and lets feeling lead the way. The other person often feels like the center of the world, at least in that moment. And for many, that sensation is deeply addictive. But this is also where the lover's trap begins to reveal itself. Because she is used to living through strong emotions, she can easily confuse intensity with depth. When passion is burning, everything feels meaningful. When the fire softens, which is completely natural in long-term relationships, she may become confused or even frightened. Something inside her whispers, "Does this mean I'm no longer loved?" And to avoid that emptiness, the lover may start searching for a new spark. The imbalance of this archetype usually doesn't come from loving too much, but from depending on the feeling of being in love to feel alive. When the lover is not nourished from within, she may chase instant pleasures, fast relationships, impulsive decisions, spending to fill emotional gaps. In the moment, these bring excitement, but afterward, the familiar emptiness often returns. At work, the lover is highly creative, inspired, and skilled at crafting experiences. She thrives in art, media, design, marketing, fashion, or any field that touches human emotion. But without structure, she may become bored and abandon projects when the work no longer feels stimulating as it did at the beginning. For the lover, the challenge is not a lack of talent, but the difficulty of staying when the emotional intensity fades. In personal life, the lover often faces inner contradictions. On one hand, she is deeply connected to her instincts, emotions, and sexuality. On the other hand, society sends mixed messages, encouraging women to be seductive while simultaneously judging them when they truly live that seductiveness. As a result, many lovers learn to suppress this energy or allow themselves to be the lover only in certain spaces, rather than letting it exist healthily throughout their lives. If you recognize yourself in this archetype, there is an important question to reflect on. Am I seeking passion to nourish life or to escape the emptiness inside? These two motivations can produce very similar behaviors, but their long-term outcomes are completely different. One fills you, the other keeps you running. The lover does not need less passion. What she needs is to give passion roots. Passion doesn't have to come only from another person. It can be cultivated from within. When the lover learns to love herself, not just through words but through concrete actions, she no longer has to cling to others to feel valuable. In love, this means not only waiting to feel desired, but also knowing what she wants, what she needs, and being willing to say it out loud. Passion then stops being a power game and becomes a genuine meeting between two mature people. In work, the lover needs to learn how to place inspiration within a structure, rather than waiting for inspiration before acting. When she learns to create her own steady rhythm, her talent and magnetism stop fluctuating wildly and become more sustainable. In daily life, lover energy is nourished through very small things. A meal eaten slowly, a song listened to all the way through, an evening without screens, simply to notice whether the body feels tired or joyful, not as something to check off, but as a reminder that you are alive. There is a very gentle practice you can try when you feel yourself chasing emotion or losing connection with your body. Pause for 1 minute, take a deep breath, and ask yourself, what am I feeling in my body right now? Don't analyze or explain, just name it. Warm, cold, tense, soft, pleasant, or heavy. Then ask one more question. What can I give my body right now without needing anyone else to provide it? It might be rest, it might be movement, it might simply be a deeper breath. When the lover learns to return to her body and emotions in this way, the inner fire no longer flares up and burns out. It becomes a steady flame, warm enough to sustain her, and bright enough to light the way for others. And then, her allure no longer comes from being chased, but from being fully present with herself. Archetype 4, the Queen. When the fire of the lover is held long enough, no longer flaring up and burning out too quickly, something very different begins to emerge. Passion is no longer just about feeling alive. It starts to want to stay, to commit, to build something with a clear name and form. Emotion begins to seek to be chosen, to occupy a position, to be recognized, and at this level, the energy of the Queen starts to reveal itself. The Queen doesn't need to speak loudly for others to know where she stands. There is a distinct steadiness in the way she carries herself. Her posture is upright, her gaze steady, her voice calm. She enters a relationship or a collective with a strong awareness of her role, not to control, but to maintain order, structure, and dignity in what she considers important. For the Queen, everything needs to have its rightful place. In everyday life, you can recognize the Queen by how much weight she places on the word we. She cares about status, about formality, about promises that are spoken and kept. She dislikes vague, undefined relationships, not because she lacks confidence, but because she knows what she is stepping into and wants things to be named correctly. To her, a relationship is not just emotion, but commitment. The Queen is often deeply loyal. Once she chooses a person, a group, or an ideal, she stays, she protects, she stands by it, even under pressure. At work, she is someone who can carry great responsibility, represent the collective, and uphold shared values and image. In family life, she is often the one who maintains order, principles, and prevents everything from falling apart. The Queen's most distinctive strength lies in her ability to build and sustain order within relationships. She doesn't just love, she knows how to give love a form. She doesn't just work, she knows how to organize, lead, and assign roles. Where there is a healthy Queen, people usually know where they stand, what they are responsible for, and can trust in a stable structure. In love, the Queen brings the feeling of being chosen with dignity. Not a fleeting infatuation, but the sense of, you are here, I am here, and we know what that means. For many, this is deeply meaningful and valuable. The Queen does not love halfway. When she loves, she wants a partner of equal stature, someone strong enough to stand beside her without being overshadowed and without trying to diminish her. Yet, this is also where the trap of this archetype begins to appear. When she ties her identity too closely to her role and status, the Queen may equate her worth with whether or not she has an official relationship. When things are going well, she shines. But when she is alone, or when the relationship falters, her self-esteem can be shaken deeply. An unbalanced Queen can become highly sensitive to betrayal. Not only betrayal in love, but even small signs of not being prioritized or respected. She may become jealous, not because she lacks confidence, but because she feels her position is being threatened. And when she is hurt, instead of confronting the person who caused the pain, she may turn to judging or competing with other women, as if they were the threat, rather than recognizing that the issue lies within the relationship itself. Another trap of the Queen is blind loyalty. Once she has chosen, she stays, even when the other person is no longer worthy. She holds on to vows, appearances, and structures, while inside, she slowly depletes. Some queens continue to defend relationships that have hurt them for a long time, simply because letting go would mean admitting that the kingdom they built has cracked. In friendships, especially with other women, the Queen can also struggle at times. When she focuses too much on her partner or her central role, she may unintentionally neglect peer connections. Friendships that don't offer clear status can be pushed aside. When the primary relationship runs into trouble, she may suddenly realize how isolated she has become. At work, the Queen is a natural leader. She doesn't necessarily have to be the boss, but she is often seen as someone with influence and authority. She is good at maintaining discipline, making decisions, and representing shared values. However, when unbalanced, she may become rigid, resistant to listening, or feel challenged when others don't follow the order she believes is right. In personal life, the Queen needs to learn something essential. Her value does not lie in the throne, but in the person sitting on it. When she only feels worthy through a specific role, she places herself in a vulnerable position. When she knows she has value even without being in a relationship, without holding power, without recognition, her authority transforms. It no longer needs to prove itself. If you sense strong Queen energy within you, try pausing with one very honest question. If tomorrow I were no longer in my current role, who would I be? This question isn't meant to frighten you, but to help you separate yourself from a role you may have worn for too long. In love, a healthy Queen learns to be with another person as a choice, not as a place to cling to for validation. She still honors commitment, but does not sacrifice herself to preserve an image. She is strong enough to say, "This is no longer right for me," even when that decision shakes an entire structure she once built. At work, she learns to lead without needing to control everything. Trusting others' abilities does not weaken her power. It allows her power to be shared and sustained. A mature queen is not threatened by others shining, because she no longer needs to protect her position by dimming those around her. In life, what nourishes this energy is not doing more or carrying more, but reconnecting with herself beyond all roles. There are moments when she needs to step down from the throne, remove the title, and simply be an ordinary woman, with friends, personal joys, and spaces that belong to no one else. To help queen energy become both soft and steady, there is a very brief practice you can try. When you notice yourself reacting strongly to feeling overlooked, abandoned, or challenged, pause for about a minute. Take a deep breath and ask, what part of me feels threatened right now? Not who is wrong, but which part of me is afraid of losing its position. When you can name that fear, your reactions soften and your choices become clearer. A true queen doesn't need to strain to prove she is a queen. Her authority radiates because she knows where she stands, and she knows that if she ever needs to walk away, she can rebuild her kingdom from within. And when that happens, her loyalty is no longer endurance, but a free and conscious choice. Before we continue, I'd like to invite you to pause for a moment and reflect on yourself. Recently, have you found yourself in a situation where you had to tense up to hold on to a position, an image, or a relationship at all costs? If so, feel free to share your story in the comments. This isn't about judgment, but about seeing more clearly how the queen within each of us speaks. Archetype 5. The Huntress. When the queen has learned how to stand firmly on her throne without tensing up to protect her position, another movement begins to unfold. Power no longer resides only in structure, status, or relationships, but shifts inward, becoming a very clear will, where I want to go, and I will take myself there. At this point, the woman no longer waits to be chosen, nor does she need anyone to grant her authority. She lifts herself out of the familiar circle of safety and directs her gaze toward the distance. This is when the energy of the huntress emerges. The huntress carries a sense of motion. She does not stand still for long, not because she lacks patience, but because there is always a goal calling to her from within. In everyday life, you can recognize the huntress by how quickly she decides. And once she decides, she acts. She does not seek excessive opinions to gain approval. Not because she disregards others, but because she trusts her own perception and judgment. She prefers to drive her own life rather than sit in the back seat, hoping someone else will take the right turn. The huntress is usually someone who sets clear goals. These may be career goals, a personal project, a social cause, or simply a journey she feels compelled to complete for herself. Her mornings often start early. The air around her carries focus. Once she is immersed in her work, she is difficult to distract. Some women enter a room with a sense of warmth. The huntress enters a room with a sense of readiness. The most distinctive strength of this archetype lies in her independence and her ability to pursue goals to the very end. The huntress does not need protection to feel safe. On the contrary, it is overcoming challenges on her own that makes her feel alive. She believes her capability is built through action, not reassurance. And it is precisely this belief that makes her deeply attractive to those who value inner strength. In work, the huntress often shines in environments that require pioneering, breaking new ground, and enduring pressure. She thrives in startups, difficult projects, and roles that drive change. The less clear things are, the more engaged she becomes. She does not wait for a perfect map. She moves forward and draws the map as she goes. For her, failure is not something to avoid, but a natural part of the journey. In love, the huntress is very different from the previous archetypes. She does not seek someone to lean on. She seeks someone to walk alongside her. She needs respect, space, and the sense that the relationship does not restrict her path. When she loves, she can be sincere and wholehearted, but if she feels controlled or confined, she withdraws very quickly. Freedom, to her, is not avoiding commitment, but being able to be herself within that commitment. Yet like all archetypes, the strength of the huntress can become a trap when taken too far. When she over-identifies with strength, she may begin to see vulnerability as a threat. Some huntresses learn very early how not to need anyone. Over time, not needing turns into not allowing herself to be tired, not allowing herself to be weak, not allowing herself to rely on anyone, even when she desperately needs to. The imbalance of the Huntress often shows up as emotional distance. She may be fully present in action, but absent in emotion. When others need to be heard, she offers solutions. When a relationship needs slowing down, she pushes the pace, not because she does not care, but because she is accustomed to solving problems rather than sitting with feelings. Another trap is the belief that being alone is enough. When emotionally immature, the Huntress may take pride in not needing anyone to the point of unintentionally pushing away those who want to love her. She views relying on someone as failure, when in reality, the ability to allow others to accompany her is another form of strength, more subtle and refined. In popular culture, this image appears very clearly. Katniss Everdeen, in The Hunger Games, is a classic Huntress, brave, independent, focused on survival, and willing to fight for what she believes in. Kate Sharma in Bridgerton also carries this energy, riding alone, needing no protection, and opening her heart only when she meets someone truly her equal. Or Wonder Woman in Wonder Woman, a symbol of the warrior woman who is both powerful and driven by a clear ideal. These figures are compelling not because they are perfect, but because of their willingness to engage fully. If you recognize strong Huntress energy within yourself, the question is not, how do I become less strong, but how to be strong without closing off. A mature Huntress retains her independence, but does not use it as a wall. She knows when to move forward and when to pause, to connect. In love, this shows up as daring to share the journey, not just the outcomes. Allowing a partner to see when she is tired, uncertain, or afraid does not make her weaker. It makes the relationship more real. The Huntress does not need to lose her freedom to love, but she does need to learn that love is not a race. In work, the Huntress can learn to rest between stages, not as quitting, but as recognizing that the body and emotions are also part of a long journey. When she allows herself to stop at the right moments, her vision becomes longer, not shorter. In personal life, this energy finds balance when she intentionally enters spaces that do not require conquering, nurturing, non-competitive activities. A yoga session, a conversation without an agenda, an afternoon of simply sitting without needing to do anything. These moments do not dull her edge. They prevent her from running empty. If you want to try a very brief practice to soften Huntress energy, choose a moment in the day when you usually tend to handle it yourself. Pause for about a minute and ask, is there anyone I could allow to walk alongside me in this? Not to do it for me, but simply to be there, just opening a very small door. For the Huntress, that alone is already a significant step. A true Huntress is not someone who always walks alone, but someone who can walk alone without needing to do so to prove anything. When she allows herself to be both strong and connected, her journey becomes not only longer but less lonely. And at the next level, it is precisely this combination of action and wisdom that opens into another form of femininity, deeper and more still. Archetype 6. The Sage. When the Huntress learns not only to charge forward, but also to pause, to listen, to reflect, to understand what is truly happening beneath the surface of events, another kind of energy begins to take shape. This energy is not loud, not rushed, and does not need to prove itself through forceful action. It is present through calmness, through seeing one step further ahead, through the ability to recognize the structure hidden within chaos. This is the moment when the sage steps forward. The sage is often someone who, from a young age, carries an air of being older than their years, not necessarily quiet, but always with a sense of maturity in how they think and respond. In everyday life, you can recognize them by their habit of observing before speaking. While others are still debating through emotion, the sage listens, gathers information, and only speaks once the core of the matter has become clear. Their words are usually few, but once spoken, they are hard to ignore. They love knowledge, in a very natural way, not to show off what they know, but because understanding makes them feel safe. Books, courses, podcasts, deep conversations, all of these are nourishment for the sage. They learn quickly, remember well, and are especially skilled at connecting scattered pieces of information into a coherent, logical picture. In a tense meeting, They are often the one who helps everything fall into place with a single, well-placed question. The most distinctive strength of the sage lies in the ability to see far ahead and think strategically. They do not only see the problem in front of them, but also its consequences, its patterns, and what may happen if one path is chosen over another. For this reason, they are often sought out as advisors. In family, among friends, and at work, they are frequently the person others consult when an important decision needs to be made. In professional life, the sage shines in roles that require thinking, planning, analysis, and foresight. They are well suited for research, strategy, law, policy, education, consulting, and senior management. They do not necessarily need to stand on the front line, but are often the ones standing behind major decisions. There is a saying that fits this archetype well: they do not need the spotlight, but the spotlight often follows the direction they point. In relationships, the sage often brings clarity. When the other person feels confused, they help organize thoughts. When conflict arises, they try to understand both sides. They value intellectual maturity and are often drawn to people with depth, strong thinking, and the ability to engage in equal dialogue. For them, intellectual connection is just as important as emotional connection. Yet this is also where the sage's trap begins to reveal itself. When they over-identify with reason, they can drift away from emotion and the body. Everything is placed on the table for analysis. Emotions become data. Sadness is explained. Pain is dissected. And in this process, the sage may forget that some things do not need to be understood, only felt. The imbalance of this archetype often shows up as a sense of coldness. Not intentional coldness, but an invisible distance. Others may feel that the sage is hard to reach, hard to get close to, or that the conversation is brilliant, but there is no feeling of being held. The sage unconsciously places themselves in the position of observing life, rather than living within it. Another trap is intellectual perfectionism. Because they want to understand correctly and think thoroughly, they may delay action for a long time. There is always another book to read, another perspective to consider, another possibility to account for, and then the opportunity passes by. Not because they lack ability, but because they wait until everything feels perfect in their mind. In love, the sage can struggle if reason is prioritized too heavily. When their partner is sad, they offer analysis. When their partner is hurt, they explain the causes. But sometimes, what is most needed is simply presence and empathy, not advice. Without awareness, the sage may make the person they love feel understood but not touched. In popular culture, this image appears very familiar. Hermione Granger is a classic example. Intelligent, eager to learn, always searching for answers, and using knowledge to protect others. Michelle Obama radiates strong sage energy, grounded, educated, strategic, and playing an essential advisory role both in career and family. Or Olivia Pope, the woman who is always one step ahead, seeing the bigger picture and making decisive moves. If you recognize strong sage energy within yourself, the question is not, how do I think less, but how to ensure that wisdom does not become disconnected from the heart. A mature sage does not lose rationality, but allows emotion to have an equal place. In love, this means that sometimes you do not need to understand why you are sad. You only need to allow yourself to be sad. You do not need to fix it immediately. You only need to stay with it. When the sage learns to listen to emotions without rushing to analyze them, relationships become softer and closer. In work, they need to learn how to bring knowledge out of the mind and into action. Not every decision needs to be perfect. Some decisions only need to be good enough for that moment. When the sage allows themselves to try, fail, and adjust, their intelligence truly becomes a living strength. In personal life, this energy is nourished when they reconnect with the body and direct experience, walking without a goal, listening to music without analyzing it, eating a meal slowly without thinking about work. These moments that seem unproductive are precisely what keep the sage from drying out inside. There is a very brief practice you can try if you feel stuck in your head for too long. When you find yourself overthinking a problem, pause for about a minute. Place a hand on your chest or belly. Take a deep breath and ask, what does my body feel right now? You do not need to answer with logic. Simply notice. Tense, heavy, light, or empty. Then ask one more question. If I stopped thinking, what would I do right now? Even one very small action is enough to bring you back into life. A true sage is not someone who knows all the answers, but someone who knows when to think and when to live. When their wisdom is placed into the flow of emotion and experience, that wisdom no longer stands above life but merges into it. And from that merging, a final form of femininity, quieter and even deeper, begins to reveal itself. Archetype 7, the mystic. If the sage seeks answers through knowledge and logic, the mystic seeks truth through stillness, intuition, and connection with the inner world. The mystic rarely makes an impression through words or grand actions. Her presence is so gentle that many people only notice it after being near her for a while. She does not enter a room with noise, yet she leaves an afterglow behind. In everyday life, you can recognize her by her choice of quiet spaces, by her preference for being alone without feeling lonely, and by the way she observes more than she participates. When others talk a lot, she listens. When others rush, she slows down. There is something difficult to name about the mystic. She does not display her inner world, yet that inner world is very deep. She can sit for hours just to write a few lines, listen to the same piece of music over and over, or watch the rain fall without feeling bored. Not because she is escaping life, but because her inner world is vivid and alive. For her, stillness is not a lack, but a form of sufficiency. The most distinctive quality of the mystic lies in her ability to connect with inner depth. She senses things through a very sharp intuition. There are things others need a long time to understand that she can simply feel and know. In relationships, she is often the one who notices the subtlest changes, a different look in the eyes, an unusual silence, an unspoken sadness. And what is special is that, being near her, others often feel safe enough to be themselves. The mystic does not try to heal anyone, yet her presence itself is healing. She does not judge, does not push, does not offer advice unless asked. She creates a space where others can breathe, where they can touch their true emotions. In a world accustomed to quick fixes and excessive talking, this conscious silence becomes a very rare kind of power. In work, the mystic often does not thrive in fiercely competitive environments or hustle-driven cultures. She shines in fields that require depth and creativity. Art, writing, music, design, therapy, independent research, or any work that allows her to move at her own rhythm. When she is in the right space, she can enter a very deep flow state where time almost disappears. In romantic relationships, the mystic loves in a very quiet way, not loud, not showy, but very deep. She needs spiritual and emotional connection more than outward form. She does not open her heart quickly, but once she does, her attachment is very enduring. For her, love is not possession, but coexisting in respect and in a silence that can be shared. However, like every other archetype, the mystic has her own traps when this energy is lived to excess. The biggest trap is withdrawing too much. Because her inner world is so rich, she can easily choose to stay there instead of stepping out. When hurt, her natural reflex is to turn inward, to go silent, to handle things alone. But being alone is not always enough. The imbalance of the mystic often shows up as avoidance of confrontation. She does not like conflict, does not like stating her needs, and does not like making others uncomfortable. And because of that, she may let many important things pass without speaking up. Suppressed emotions do not disappear. They sink deeper, and over time can turn into fatigue, nameless sadness, or a sense of being disconnected from the world. Another trap is indecisiveness. Because she sees so many layers of meaning, so many possibilities, the mystic can sometimes struggle to choose. She senses every side of an issue, but that very sensitivity can leave her standing still. Opportunities come and go, while she is still waiting for a clear signal from within. Yet intuition, if not practiced alongside action, can also become vague. In popular culture, this energy does not appear frequently, but when it does, it is hard to forget. Sade is a classic example. Her music is calm, seductive, and full of depth, while she herself stays away from the noise of the spotlight. Or Phoebe Buffay, with her eccentricity, strong intuition, and a way of living that is entirely her own, without needing to be fully understood. Angelina Jolie also radiates a similar sense of mystery, quiet, deep, and seemingly always carrying a very private inner world. If you recognize strong mystic energy in yourself, the question is not, how do I become more open, but how to remain still without disappearing. A mature mystic does not lose her private space, but knows how to choose carefully whom to open up to. She understands that sharing does not diminish depth, but gives that depth somewhere to flow. In love, this means daring to speak her needs, even if her voice is soft. Daring to say, I need more time, I am sad, I am not okay, instead of disappearing, and hoping the other person will understand on their own. For the mystic, expressing emotion is not a betrayal of her introverted nature, but a way of protecting it. In work, she needs to learn how to bring intuition into structure. Her ideas are deep, but if they are not brought outward, they will exist only in silence. When she allows herself to present, to test, to share in small steps, her intuitive wisdom can truly create impact. In personal life, this energy is nourished through conscious stillness, not being alone while scrolling on a phone, but high-quality solitude, meditation, journaling, drawing, cooking, slow walks. These activities help her stay connected to the inner world without cutting her off from the outer one. There is a very gentle practice you can try. If you feel yourself withdrawing too deeply, take 1 minute, breathe deeply, and ask yourself, what inside me wants to be spoken, even to just one person? You do not need to tell everyone. One safe person is enough. Then ask one more question. What is the smallest step toward connection? It might be just sending a message or saying one very short sentence. For the mystic, such small steps are bridges between the inner world and life. A true mystic is not someone who escapes the world, but someone who brings the depth of the inner world into life quietly. When she learns how to be both in silence and present among people, her mystery is no longer distance, but becomes magnetism. And when you look back over the entire journey through the 7 archetypes, you may realize that none of them is a final destination. They are simply different streams of energy for you to learn to use, combine, and live more fully with yourself. Balancing and integrating the archetypes. According to Carl Jung, when you have gone through all 7 archetypes, you will more or less recognize yourself in some of them. But the core of Jung's work on archetypal systems was not only to help you identify and understand yourself, it was to help you realize something even more important. No archetype is meant to be lived in forever. Each archetype is only a stream of energy. The issue is not who you are, but where you are stuck. There is a very interesting phenomenon that Jung observed. We often feel irritated, even strongly reactive, toward people who represent the parts of ourselves we have abandoned. If you find yourself uncomfortable with people who are too weak, too dreamy, too pleasure-seeking, too quiet, these may be precisely the parts you once cut off to grow up, to be strong, or to be accepted. What we dislike is often not wrong in itself, but something that used to be us, or could have been us. On the other hand, there are archetypes we live in for far too long, not because they are perfect, but because they once helped us be loved. Some people grow up by becoming mothers, caring for everyone, so they can feel needed. Some learn to become the Huntress, strong and self-reliant, so they will not be hurt. Some live for a very long time as the queen, holding on to image and position, because they fear that if they let go, they will no longer have value. These roles were originally survival strategies, but when life changes and we continue to cling to them, they become masks. Jung called the process of psychological maturation individuation, the process of becoming oneself in a whole and integrated way. He once wrote a sentence that is central to this journey. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This does not mean digging endlessly into pain, but daring to look directly at the parts of ourselves that we have rejected, denied, or lived out for the sake of others. Integrating the archetypes does not mean living all 7 equally, but learning how to regulate the flow of energy at each stage of life. And the way to do this is neither complicated nor lofty. It is very everyday and practical. First, clearly see where you are dominant. Is there an archetype you use very well, very naturally, to the point that others always recognize you through it. This part does not need to be discarded. It is your asset. It is something you keep, but use more consciously, instead of letting it drive you unconsciously. Next, look at where you tend to stumble. Every time you feel exhausted, argue, burn out, or repeat an old pattern, ask yourself, where is this archetype being overused? Is it caring too much, controlling too tightly, being independent to the point of isolation? Here, there is no need for self-blame. You only need to adjust the rhythm. Finally, pay attention to the archetype you admire, but find difficult to live. It might be the softness of the maiden, the pleasure-seeking of the lover, or the stillness of the mystic. Each day, simply practice one small behavior that represents the archetype you admire. When you do this, you will notice a very different shift. You no longer have to choose, what kind of woman am I? You begin to become someone who knows how to use herself. And this is the deepest spirit of Jung's work. Not changing yourself into someone else, but reclaiming the parts that were lost, so that no part of you has to live in the shadows anymore. And what about you? Is there an archetype you have lived in for so long that you forgot you still have other parts inside? Or is there an energy you have avoided, one you never allowed yourself to touch? If so, share your experience in the comments. Your story may become a mirror for someone else to reflect on themselves, and also a way for us to learn together how to integrate, rather than trying to become someone else. A 7-day archetype application path to increase your magnetism. Each day, having accompanied each other to this moment, you likely already know which archetype you naturally lean toward, and you may even see clearly that you have been living very comfortably inside a few familiar roles. But there is a secret that truly magnetic women rarely say out loud. They never live from only one source of energy. Their attractiveness comes from knowing when to be strong, when to be soft, when to move forward, and when to step back. In other words, they know how to blend themselves. And to make this more than just a theory, you can begin with a very simple 7-day path. You can even write this guide down as a way to consciously increase your own magnetism. During the first 2 days, do not rush to change anything. Simply observe. Observe how you react when things are normal. When you are not under pressure, how do you tend to act? Do you naturally nurture, lead, chase goals, or sink into thought? Do not try to label it. Just note this. This is the energy I use most naturally. This observation helps you recognize your true strengths, rather than the ones you think you are supposed to have. On the 3rd and 4th days, shift your attention to the more uncomfortable moments. When you are stressed, exhausted, or triggered by an old fear, which mode do you tend to switch into? Do you become more controlling, withdraw, harden yourself, or take care of others, to the point of forgetting yourself? These reactions are not for judgment, but for understanding. This is my survival strategy. Once you can see it, it has less power to run you unconsciously. The 5th and 6th days are when you intentionally practice one small behavior from the archetype you lack or admire. If you are always strong, try one gentle action. If you are used to caring for others, try putting yourself first in one small situation. If you tend to analyze everything, try feeling without explaining. Just one behavior, very small, but done with awareness. It does not need to be perfect. It only needs your presence. On the 7th day, create a quiet space to look back on the entire week and write something very special for yourself, your personal user manual. What rhythm of life suits you? What do you need when you are tired? Where do you tend to lose balance? And what helps you return to yourself the fastest? When you write these things down, you no longer have to guess who you are. Sustainable magnetism does not come from becoming an idealized archetype. It comes from flexibility, from understanding yourself deeply enough that no single part of you can pull you too far off course. And when you begin to live from that understanding, others are not only drawn to you, they also feel safe around you. That is a kind of attraction that is very hard to forget. We have walked together through the journey of exploring the 7 feminine archetypes, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, and learning how to apply them in love and in life. Now, you hold in your hands the energy map of yourself, along with the formulas to blend these energies into a version of you that is more magnetic, flexible, and unpredictable than ever before. I would truly love to hear your story. Which archetype feels most like you? Which pair of archetypes do you want to try combining to create a new kind of attraction? Share in the comments, because you might inspire someone else who is watching this video. If you found this video helpful, please like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next insights. Remember, all of these feminine archetypes are not simply about discovering who you are, but about learning how to activate and use the different facets of yourself. Thank you for staying until the end, and remember that you deserve a deep love, a lasting relationship, and a life in which you feel whole. Everything begins with understanding yourself, and I am here to walk alongside you.